Awesome. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for joining. This is our second virtual retailer roundtable, and after such nice feedback and a positive event back in the fall, we decided to do another round, and we're really fortunate to have such a great group today. As Adrian mentioned, I'm Jake. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sweet Nothings. I'm also on the board of Naturally New York, which is a chapter of Naturally Network. For those not as familiar with Naturally Network, it is a community of 9 regional chapters that span the full spectrum of natural and organic products, including food, beverage, beauty, supplement industries, and more. Naturally Boulder kicked it off in 2005. Naturally New York and Los Angeles and Minnesota are the latest, and the network continues to grow. Here in the New York chapter, we now have almost 700 active members, 350 conscious consumer companies represented, and over 75 partners. So we're doing lots more virtual and live events in the coming year. And please reach out if you want to learn more and get involved either with the New York chapter or your local chapter. Without further ado, I will pass it off to today's host, Cayne. Ali, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jake. Thanks everyone for being here. As Jake said, I'm Alison Cayne. I'm the founder and CEO of Haven's Kitchen. I'm also a board member of Naturally New York. And like Jake said, we were really overwhelmed with the last panel that we did. And we wanted to continue asking some of our favorite retailers and the most helpful retailers in the industry that we know for more of their best practices. I think brands are having a perfect storm at the moment in a lot of ways. Consumers are a little freaked out by food prices. Investors are asking us to get profitable tomorrow with no trade spend and, perfect margins. And retailers are having, issues of their own with labor and supply chain and still adjusting to sort of post-COVID reality, kind of. So the more that we can support each other as a community and the more that we can learn how to make the most of our opportunities with retailers, not only just getting on the shelf, but staying on the shelf and really doing our best for consumers out there, the more I think vibrant and healthy this industry will be. And that's ultimately one of my personal goals. I know it's one of Jake's, certainly part of these three, and Naturally New York as well. So I like to have each panelist introduce themselves. It usually is less boring than when I do it. So Luan, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luan Heilner. I have been with FreshDirect for the last 5 years working on the merchandising team. During my time here, I've managed a handful of categories out of the center store, including freezer, baby boutique pet shop, and for this past year, the dairy category as well. The day-to-day of my job really includes new product sourcing, pricing and promotions, shop and marketing planning, and I've had the absolute pleasure of working directly with both Ali and Jake to launch their amazing products on our platform.
Thank you. You went in a little out, but I heard amazing product. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, my internet was a little unstable, which is not a good sign. But I heard amazing product and I was like, yay, thank you. John, let's go to you.
Hi, everyone. How y'all doing today? Happy snowy Tuesday from New York. So I'm John Lawson. I've been with Whole Foods for 18 plus years. I was the regional grocery buyer for many years up until about 1.5 years ago when I switched over and became the senior local forager. So I currently work on sourcing new products across multiple categories that are locally manufactured and locally based. And I also have had the pleasure of working with Ali with onboarding and into Whole Foods Market, and really excited to be talking to all y'all today.
And Wade, what about you?
All right. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wade Yenny. I'm the Vice President of Center Store and Space Planning for the Fresh Market. We have 159 stores in 22 states, so kind of spread out mostly on the Southeast and up into the Northeast. I've been with the Fresh Market just about a year now. Prior to that, I spent time in California with Jimbo's Naturally, Louisiana with Rouse's Markets, and Ohio with Bueller's Food Markets. So been in the grocery business just a little bit over 20 years. And I've also had the pleasure of working with both Allie and Jake, a little bit on the West Coast, a little bit now on the East Coast. And I also host a weekly podcast on LinkedIn Live with Alex Bear from Genius Juice called Friday Vibes that we have a pretty good audience that join us every week there. So yeah, that's me.
Yes, I actually got to be a guest on that, and that was really fun. We had a real deep conversation.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah. It's funny because some of them just go off the rails. We don't talk anything about CPG, but some of them are really focused. It just really depends. So it's but we had a good conversation. Definitely.
I think that, the more that we, like I said, the more that this industry, more than any, I think is really supportive of each other. And the more that we talk about this stuff, because there's so much stuff, and a lot of food entrepreneurs especially aren't coming at it from serial entrepreneurship. We're coming at it from our grandmother's recipe, or, in my case, a cooking school. And so we don't know what we don't know. So John, I want to start with you because I want to sort of ground the conversation in something that you said on my podcast in 2018 or 2019. And I'll never forget it. And it's been sort of our sort of flag that we've carried for the past 4 years, essentially, which is, think of a retailer giving you a slot on the shelf, like an investor giving you a check. And it's always sort of stuck in there because I think people have this assumption that, the home run is getting on the shelf. But that's just the getting up to bat. And I think that changing that for brands is really critical, and having it sort of dictate the way that you behave with your retailer partners is important. So can you elaborate a little bit on the retailer side of what that means, making that investment in a brand, and why do you kind of frame it that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. The all the work that a supplier does, that all of you all do as entrepreneurs, knocking on the door, getting the product in front of the buyer, doing the paperwork, all the due diligence, the compliance work, everything to actually get on the shelf is actually sort of the pregame, and the real game starts when you get on the shelf. In brick and mortar, especially, shelf space is a premium. We're built in steel in linear feet, and when Whole Foods Market or any brick and mortar retailer is able to make space for a supplier on the shelf, the retailer is making an investment by giving up that space to a supplier. The space is basically the space becomes the investment, like Ali said, and so you really need to think of sales as the retailer's return on investment, so that as you generate sales, not just sales, but also growth, not just growth, but also bringing your customers, finding your customers in all the ways that y'all are out there doing that, whether it's through social media, through guerrilla marketing, through all the innovative ways that I see brands connecting with their customers and getting them into the store. The sales, the growth, those are the return on investment. Bringing customers into the store, because if you're able to bring customers into the store to buy your product, then you're actually supporting other products in that store. When the customer is coming in to buy yours, they're going to pick up other things as well. So really the investment is all the energy that you as a brand can bring through your product onto the sales floor itself. So, you know, you want to be innovative, you want to come up with compelling strategies to drive not just sales, but it's sales, it's growth, and it's repeat purchase. So those are why it's an investment, because the return on investment, the payoff is that we're gonna be able to increase our customer base through the customers that you bring in with your product. So yeah.
And I wanted to make sure I didn't mute myself. Wade, I want to go to you for a second, because I feel like if we talk about sales, especially with Whole Foods, there's a portal. If we talk about growth, there's a portal. Repeat purchase, we can try to sort of, there's a velocity number. We can try to sort of attribute that to repeat. But Wade, in your experience in a couple of different, retail environments, brick and mortar, have you seen a brand do a good job of saying, here's how we're bringing people into your store? Like, is there a way to sort of show that in our presentations to y'all?
I think you can tell that story a little bit with your data. Like, I think John had a lot of good points with what he talked about. I think you as a brand, by focusing on your success stories and someone that you partnered with really well. I know we've shared some stories on the various talks we've had, Ali, about some good strategies, some not so good strategies, and just really, I'm always a big person that you have to really cater your pitch to your retailer or to your customer is, and what works for Luann might not work for John, might not work for me. And so the more that you can identify what's going to work for each given person, I think the easier it'll be. So, so data points are certainly helpful as far as those successes. And I think also for me personally, there's a lot of that conversational piece, being able to say, not just on a PowerPoint, because I'm the guy that hates PowerPoints. Not just to, I always say ditch the deck, right? So I'm the guy that wants to have a little bit more, tell me about yourself. Tell me, I get invested personally in stories and reasons behind that. So if you can give me some examples of some of those successes that have worked, I think I'm going to be more engaged than just to simply try and overload me with data that maybe I might be interested in or could care less about. So I don't know if I answered your question, but hopefully.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, to the extent that we need to have a good story, I think part of the challenge sometimes is like, we hear you need to show that you're this. And I think sometimes founders and operators are like, how? Especially as an emerging brand, sometimes we're like, how? But we'll circle back if we have a specific example, let's say. Lawson, for you are not made of steel. I mean, I guess your warehouse is made of steel, but you're e-com only. And FreshDirect has been leading e-com I think I've been a FreshDirect customer for 20 years. And I'm just curious, we saw obviously a big spike during COVID. We saw a lot of, almost flash in the pan e-com sites, marketplaces pop up, and we've seen them fizzle or consolidate a bit. I'm just wondering, as sort of like the leader, at least in, on the East Coast, as far as I know, in the field, insights into post-COVID shopping dynamics, a little bit of how you're meeting all of these brands, you're seeing all of the shifting consumer behavior. How are your decisions being made maybe a little differently now than they were a year and a half ago? And is there anything that brands should know for these hundreds of people, almost 200 people, that will help us make you want us?
Definitely. So I'd say, just to start off, for FreshDirect, and what we've seen is customers have really stuck with us even after the height of the pandemic, which is great to see. Last year in 2022, our customer loyalty rate with our residential customers was up 7% from where we were in 2019. And so customers are still looking to us to help provide those simple, healthy culinary experiences at home and make them easy throughout the week. And something I've really loved to see is that throughout the pandemic and even still now, we do notice a conscious consumer that really wants to support the local community and is interested in discovering more items from growers, producers, food innovators that are based right here in our backyard in New York. I'll say a few ways that we've sort of shifted our thinking, especially looking at current shopping behaviors, and particularly in this inflationary environment, is just taking a close look at some of our customer shopping habits. So one thing we've done is added a few more larger format items onto the site. So we've noticed customers are buying more in bulk. They're shifting into those value-sized items, really to try and save some extra dollars on their weekly shop.
So we should make like a 42-ounce pouch of chimichurri.
Go large.
Done. Got it. Thank you so much. We can be done with the panel now. Okay.
But even things like, like doing multi-packs of single-serve chimichurri sauce that you can use and take with you throughout the week, things like that have really been taking off. And similarly, we've seen customers really eating at home more often, so buying more prepared foods, larger sized entrees, really looking to spend less on dining out currently. And across the store, we did a lot of work last year just to really expand our assortment. So we added over 800 new items across a whole variety of different price points to satisfy not only our New York Metro customer, but also that suburban customer base that really discovered the convenience of online grocery throughout the pandemic. And again, going back to customers looking to save, a big part of that expansion was we saw that customers are shifting into private label items and really looking for, sustainably sourced organic options that won't break the bank. And right now on our site, we're currently carrying over 600 items within our Just FreshDirect and Nature's Promise brands as a solution for that.
Yeah, private label is music to the brand's ears. Just kidding. No, but it's it's something that we all have to reckon with. We should actually, I'm going to make a note to talk about it at the end if I can get us there, because I do think it's something we all should be thinking about and talking about. Wade, I want to go back to you for a second because you have some what I call like Wadeisms. And I think what I find so helpful about you is, a lot of us that are in emerging brands are, they say make it super simple, right? Like take this thing that already exists that consumers know how to use and just like make it a little better for you, or make it a flavor that, maybe is up and coming. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to change consumer behavior. Obviously, I didn't get that memo in 2018 when I put sauce in a pouch. So, but a lot of emerging brands are sort of in the same boat where we know that we need to educate consumers, whether it's on adaptogenic ingredients, or it's in a new type of package, or it's in a new part of the store that they're not used to. And one of the things that you said to me, that really stuck with me was that as a brand, like I have to understand that it's very, very challenging for the grocer to educate on our behalf. That, it was hard in 2019, it has gotten much harder. So for those of you who were like, if they just put my blank with the blank, they can't do that so easily, if that tracks for everyone. I hope all 200 of you just understood what I meant. Like in my case, right, I can only go back to us. It would be so great if we could just be in the bunker with the meat, right? But putting our sauce that is not sold in meat in a bunker with meat is actually incredibly challenging for a retailer. And you gave me the example of not even a brand having a hard time, but even just like putting the bacon and the eggs together. They're two different buyers. They're operating on two different budgets. They got to walk across the store. Who's refilling the thing if that one is low? So I'd love a little bit of just nuance around, like a little behind the scenes of we need to lower our expectations, I think, of like the support that we're going to get, as much as you're all lovely, supportive people in retail. B, what you've seen brands do that's worked, in lieu of just being like, darn it, I wish that they would just give me a secondary placement or a clip strip.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. And I always say, I always say crawl, walk, run. So, and inch wide, mile deep, that's what we're talking about here, I think. And so, to peel the curtain back a little bit, when you're talking about brick and mortar and you're talking about execution, you kind of gave a couple examples of bacon and eggs and sauces and different things, but John mentioned real estate and talking about looking at it that way, and as much as I think putting your retailer hat on, you want to everybody to be collaborative and work together to execute what you envision. The reality of it is as you said, you're talking about a different individual at store level that's responsible for ordering, for stocking, for working those departments. So many times what often happens is when you have those placements outside of your quote unquote home department, once you get that original display set and it sells down, the reality of the execution and restocking, replenishing, whether it's product that's in-house or product that needs reorder or something like that, it gets harder and harder, because using that example of bacon and eggs, for example, if I'm trying to put eggs in the meat department where the bacon goes, if you look at the dairy categories, you got yogurt, you got milk, you got cheese, you got butter, eggs, all these different high velocity items that a dairy person is so busy filling throughout the day. They're going to work on that, and they've got their priority list with orders and reorders and stock coming in, stock going out. The likelihood of that individual getting over to that perimeter department in meat, for example, to stock an ancillary display of eggs is probably not very realistic, especially in the environment we're in right now. I mean, I don't think I'm sharing any trade secrets that retail is so challenging right now, finding help from a labor perspective. So the best execution that you have now is even more challenged with the lack of bodies and personnel to get things done, not because of budgets, but because of just the bodies in the workforce. So I think those are all things the brands need to think about when they're looking at where they're going to quote unquote live in the store, and if it makes sense, especially off the jump, to try and get secondary placement someplace else. I think that's just something that's really challenging.
And sending in merchandising teams. I mean, I know, Whole Foods is very like clean for policy. I believe the Fresh Market also really doesn't like you to futz around in there as a brand. That's New York word or play. Right. But, I think, we also, a lot of brands, I think, feel like between sort of labor issues, UNFI issues, a lot of us are feeling the need to get some bodies back out into the stores to check our voids and to make sure that we're looking okay. And if possible, to do something kind of clever. If you're shelf stable, make a little, display, or try to do, exactly, more sampling. Are you seeing brands activate more merchandising teams, and are you seeing the broker teams in there more? It's not inexpensive, so it's also a little bit challenging for us because it's hard to show the return on that a little bit. It takes a long time to show that putting in a team of boots in the ground actually does impact, sales and velocity. But are you seeing more of it? Do you recommend it? Does it help from your perspective?
I think is the general answer to me is yes. We're seeing brands definitely use that as a vehicle to help achieve some execution, because I think they realize the shortcomings of the workforce out there. I think my advice would be the same suggestion, would just be to focus, before you sign a 6-month or year contract with someone that's going to support you, test the water, right? I mean, don't dive into the deep end before you see what kind of commitment or what kind of execution you're going to get from one of those other parties. I think if you can test it at a couple stores or a region, see how they're going to perform for you, see what they're going to do. I think one of the things I always talk about is accountability from, if you have a broker or third-party merchandising or something like that, is holding them accountable for what they say they're going to do. And I think that is one of the challenges, I think, from the brand side, is that you have to have, if it's not yourself, you have to have someone assigned to do that and follow up, because it's easy just to write somebody a check and say, okay, they're going to fill the shelves, they're going to do this. But then holding them accountable for what they say they're going to do, you've got to be able to measure that and see if it works for you.
Yeah. John, I actually want to go to you on this too, because one of the things you said to me early on is, you're a supporter of the DSD model for an early stage brand in the Northeast, not going straight to UNFI. And I think that's fair to say. And part of it, I think the bulk of it is because they do nurture the brand very early on. They're not just dropping it off in a case in the back door and hoping that it gets on shelf and it looks pretty. They're really unpacking, they're, checking those voids, maybe not to the extent that like a full merchandising team would, but more than a UNFI or a Cayne would. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, just for, I think especially Northeast, but I'm not sure about the DSD model anywhere else, but at least why you feel like brands need that nurturing at the beginning, and if we, how to solve for the gap a little bit if we aren't getting it.
Yeah, from the Northeast perspective, we're very fortunate here. We have a very strong roster of regional distributors who have strong relationships at the buying level, at the store level. They understand our processes. I mean, everyone knows that Whole Foods processes are, can be a little bit tricky sometimes, a little detailed, lots of portals, like you said. So, it's going back to Wade's crawl, walk, run. I think it's important to make sure that you're testing the waters carefully in a number of ways. I mean, if you're going to jump right into UNFI, you've got to be ready to, you got to be ready to fight off, sharks and piranhas, because that's basically the environment you're going into. It's the deep water, and you don't necessarily want to start there. And a lot of suppliers in the Northeast have found success and stayed with our regional distribution, because the regional distribution that we have is really strong. They have merchandising with regional distributors. There's also outside merchandising, which we found a lot of success with in our stores and are very supportive of. Our regional merchandisers, they're in the stores, they're rotating product. It is an additional expense. To Ali's point, like you don't want to bury yourself in unnecessary or unaccountable expenses. But I think if you interview them like you would if you're bringing on a team member, and you have a specific set of tasks for them to follow, and you check off those tasks and make sure they're doing it. Also, I don't know if any of them are on the call, they'll probably kill me for saying this, but ask for a free month with them to test them out. Like, say, let me see what your service looks like for a month. Let me see what we can actually get done in a month. And, if they deliver, you might, there is a good return, there can be a good return on investment. A lot of people hire their own team. Like, you have to measure the efficacy of having one person on your team who's visiting. We're up 50. Rochester, coming in a month and a half, will be our 56th store in the Northeast region. And it's a lot of stores to hit, from Buffalo all the way out to Lake Grove, down almost to Princeton, out to Morristown. It's out to Milford in Connecticut. It's a huge area to cover. And the merchandisers actually have teams that cover those areas. The DSDs have teams that cover those areas. But staying on crawl, walk, run, because I really like that as a mantra, is building relationships in the stores. You as the founder, don't shoot too high too fast. You want to make sure that you're I always think of it like a military campaign. You want to make sure that you're conquering one store at a time. You're winning hearts and minds, right? Like, you're going in and you're getting to know each team member, each buyer in each store. and then moving to the next store, getting to that buyer, because those are the relationships that will really serve you well over time. And you get to know those buyers, and they become advocates and ambassadors for your brand in the store. You know, they feel protective of the brand as the brand grows, and as you move into you know, more stores, more metros, more regions. You know, I think, Ali, you've got a lot of experience with that, with the sauce, is like getting to know everyone in the stores and being able to say, oh, you know, this person is a big supporter, and, you know, I'm still working on getting this store really behind it. Because once you get that support, you can solve some of the issues. You can occasionally get some of that secondary placement, like you're talking about the bacon and eggs, right? Like you know, with those relationships, you can say, hey, we're going on sale. Maybe I can, you know, leverage that relationship. But if you're not building those relationships, then you know, your supply line isn't solid, and you're going to lose the war, even if you win some battles along the way. Crawl, walk, run, like start store by store, team member by team member. And if you are going to work with a merchandiser, make sure you give them specific tasks and have a checklist, and hold them, to Wade's point, hold them accountable for those tasks.
Yeah. And don't sign a multi-year contract that you cannot
I would
exit.
say that for life in general, be careful of multi-year contracts.
Yeah, life in general. And you know what the thing is? So everyone just in the chat, DSD is the acronym for the, you know, direct, not the Unify, the direct
Store delivery,
direct store delivery. So they're going in, they're putting things on the shelf. Just so when acronyms come up, I like to just let everyone know what they are. Yeah. And one other thing about contracts, you know, brands, we often feel like we are not in a position to negotiate much. We don't tend to have a ton of leverage, especially when we're just starting off. We feel lucky that a distributor's taking us. We feel lucky that a store is putting us anywhere. But it doesn't mean that you have to sign predatory contracts. And it doesn't mean that you don't get to have a 30-day out clause instead of a 90-day out clause. Those dollars are very meaningful. That's just my 2 cents. Okay, Lawson.
One other thing I want to say is saying no is one of the most valuable tools that you have. You know, I'm often telling suppliers at Whole Foods, when our global team in Austin reaches out, and if someone says, oh, you know, you're doing well in the Northeast, we're going to put you in all the Whole Foods, saying no is okay. Or saying, well, can we talk about, you know, adding one more region instead of adding all the regions? Saying no is the most powerful thing you can do, because you're not going to not get another chance if you say no. As a matter of fact, you might even be more intriguing. Oh, wow, they're turning down this chance because they're being strategic. But if you say yes and you fail on that full national launch, you'll probably never get another chance. So just think about no. When you're saying no, you're not turning down an opportunity. You're reserving a bigger opportunity for when you're ready to take advantage of that.
And I think, you know, the flip side of sort of the environment that we're in these days, where it's not like grow, 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 top line, top line, top line, where it's a little bit more, are you building a sustainable business? Or are you building a profitable business? You know, that's going to be a little bit more zeitgeisty than what it has been in the last couple of years, where, you know, the pressure has been on to just like triple every year and exit in 5. Like, take that pressure off yourself, all of you people, because I did. Lawson, we talked a lot about brick and mortar. I'd like to talk a little bit about your process when you meet brands. Do you evaluate by, you know, do you identify gaps in the category and then go out and try to find them? Do you just take advice from other brands? What's your incoming looking like? What's your favorite type of meeting? And what's your favorite, I think, next step process for getting brands launched? You know, we might not be able to do secondary placements, but we can have flyouts or call outs or banners or, oops, you forgot to add this to your cart things. So tell me a little bit about FreshDirect's process from sort of beginning through success.
Yep, sure. I'd say, first off, like many other retailers, we typically have a category review calendar that we set and plan for each year. And as a brand, if you're looking to really start that initial conversation with a retailer, I definitely recommend asking about a review calendar, because really just helps you better understand if there is a certain window where you can have that most productive conversation with your category manager or your buyer. But that's not to say, FreshDirect, we are pretty nimble about reviewing opportunities outside of that set schedule. Throughout the year, organically, we are meeting lots of brands through whether it's trade shows, great local events like this, or just through current relationships and connections in the industry. And particularly if there's a really strong case, as you said, a gap in the assortment or a nice seasonal opportunity, those are things we still want to hear about. I would say I'm very much like Wade in that when I meet a brand for the first time, I'm really looking to have a conversation. I want to hear your story. I do want to see some data points that complement your pitch, whether it's current performance in the market, product rankings, really those key attributes that make your product so unique. But what I'm really looking to understand is, as a brand, who do you see as your top 3 competitors in the market today, and what differentiates you from those brands? I'm also really interested to see if a brand has a loyal customer following, if they understand their consumer, whether it's through, selling through local markets, doing D2C business, or following on social media. For if we were to launch together tomorrow, do you have a consumer following that would be excited to learn that your product is now available on FreshDirect?
Right. I had a question. Sorry, I looked like I was about to interrupt you, and then I kind of did and sort of didn't. But when you say that you want us to talk about our competitors and how we're better, do you want that to be explicit? I'm always a little bit confused about it. Like, is it brand X, or is it like, call out the competitor and just say like they use whatever and we don't? Like, how specific do you want us to be about our competition and why we're better?
Yep, I do see a lot of brands really be explicit and lay it all out. This specific brand uses these ingredients. Here's where we're different. We are using all organic, or we don't use any additives, none of those natural flavors, things like that. You can be explicit about.
One of the things I also just want to say about launching on a FreshDirect or an e-com is that for like a product where a lot of emerging brands, we are not alone, we were a little unclear where we go. Sauce in a Pouch had a couple of different potential homes, and it's the kind of thing where, on a FreshDirect, you can just be tagged as a condiment or a sauce or a meal solution in different ways. You don't necessarily have to live in one part of the store. So it is nice for emerging brands to start that way. And I mean, if you work with someone on that end, I would think that there would be some support probably in being like, you do best when you're here, or, that type of thing. I mean, John, for us, we were really fortunate in the 14 Whole Foods that we started in with you. You put us a third of those stores next to hummus, a third of those stores next to, where we are, and a third of those stores in produce. And we actually did the best in produce, but we got we got to where we are. But it's fine. It's fine. We did fine. But it's for people who are creating new products that don't necessarily exist right now, e-com can be really, really helpful. And I love the fact that you're all 3 sort of saying something that I think we should hone in on a little bit, which is if emerging brands don't necessarily have a ton of data, what we do have is our story. And part of our story is who we are and why this product exists and how it makes people's lives better. But part of the story is also who's buying it and why are they buying it and why are they going to come onto your platform or walk into your store. And that's stuff that we don't need to spend a lot of money on data to do. So I'm curious, and I know this wasn't necessarily in the pre-game, but do any of the 3 of you remember anyone telling you a particularly compelling story, not necessarily about themselves or the brand, but like, this is how we know that people are looking for us? Is it just we have a lot of TikTok followers, or is it, is there anything you can give us that like is a little juicy something where, you know, we can kind of sink our teeth into? Because I think we all spend a lot of time making a great product and we are building community, but sometimes it's hard to put that into something that you can, like a tangible something. And Jake, if you want to chime in too on this one, you can, but I think it's kind of important now that we've sort of talked about it. Any of the retailers have a thought? Loan, you look like you do.
Yeah, I can start off with a little nugget. So previously when I was managing the frozen category, I was really impressed with a brand when they met with me for the first time. They were actually a local restaurant here in New York that started packaging their frozen meals. And they were able to bring to me, you know, this is the traffic we see in our restaurant, and we know customers are looking to eat more at home. This was during the pandemic. And they had managed to just organically on their own grow a really impressive social following. And we ended up partnering together and launching on FreshDirect together. And I was just so impressed. They did a lot of work on their end, really leveraging that social following they had to drive traffic to our store and really announce a launch in a big way.
We used to do swipe up to buy, but I don't think that's a thing anymore. Like, I don't know, I'm not on Instagram anymore, but like you used to be able to go swipe up to buy and it would take you straight to FreshDirect, which we would do sometimes, but not all the time, because we also loved our other retailers so much. But Wade, anything from you?
I don't know if I have an exact nugget. I think I keep going back to just really understanding the retailer that you're going at, you know, like how do they go to market, right? The way we go to market and our promotional vehicles, you know, you can get a good feel for, I always say this is like, do your homework. You can go, whether it's, you know, our social handles that we use, whether it's Instagram, you know, Facebook, TikTok, what have you. What are we promoting? What is our vibe? And, you know, so you can never step foot in our store, but with technology, you can virtually, right? You can utilize all those methods that I said. You can go to Instacart and look at our assortment. You can do that. So you can, if you can't physically go inside a store and see things firsthand, you can at least see, okay, I kind of get the idea of where I would live. Again, I keep using that verbiage, where I would live in the store, and this is kind of what I would go after, as opposed to, you know, I feel like Microsoft's going to come after me for bashing PowerPoint, but you know, instead of just sending that deck that you sent to all three retailers on this call, cater it to knowing what he's looking for and she's looking for, and doing a little bit more than simply just mailing that same pitch deck out over and over and over again. Really put some thought into how that retailer is going to market. I think that's
I think that's great advice. And again, this is just like, you can this doesn't cost anything. This is like, and it's not just, you know, what the assortment is, but it's like, what do they say their values are? You know, what do they say they care about? Every retailer is also building a brand. How does my brand and that brand, you know, hold hands and play nicely together? And I guess what you're saying a little bit, both of you, is like, the more specific we are and the more it looks like we're not just like, hope I, you know, hit some retailer with this arrow, but like, I'm really focused on like making this a working partnership with you. And I know how you promote, and I know what options there are. And this is what I've been thinking would work maybe for you guys. The more inclined you are to like us. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I would add to that, make sure that you, before you go into any retailer, whether it's, you know, e-com or brick and mortar, make sure you walk the store on the set, or, you know, research, you know, to Wade's point. And I can't emphasize enough, you want to really have thought through where your product's going to live in the store. So often these days, especially in the age of, you know, there is no more white space, you know, it's the white space is often found, like, you know, around the corner behind, you know, it's white space is a rainbow rabbit at this point. You know, it's something you're chasing after that you might never actually see on its own, but when it gets put in front of you, you're like, oh, of course, I get it. Like sauce in a pouch, right? So you want to have thought out where you're going to live in the store. You want to have a plan for that. I mean, for Whole Foods, I always give the advice, You obviously want to go to non-busy time, check in with customer service, let them know what you're doing. But, you can put your product on a shelf and take a picture, just clean up the shelf afterwards. Like you want to leave a clean shelf afterwards so you can actually see what your product's going to look like on the shelf. It's an amazingly simple way to sort of understand where you're going to live and if you're going to fit in with the other kids on the block, to in terms of, color, size, price. Like, I mean, SRP pricing is so much a part of your package too. Like you want to make sure that you know what your SRP is going to be. A lot of times I ask, what's your SRP? And I get a blank look. And, sometimes a really new supplier hasn't thought that through. And you really need to know what your SRP is going to be, and that it's, that you've thought it through, so you're going to be profitable, because there's no point in doing this if you're not going to be profitable, that you're actually going to compete on the shelf at that price point. So super important to
Have your ducks in a row.
and really have thought through where you want to live in the store. Like, which set specifically do you think makes the most sense for you to live in?
Yeah, when he says some retailers hadn't, or some brands hadn't thought that through when they first met, you may or may not be referring to me, but it's fine. We figured it out. It's fine. John, I want to also ask you, because I feel like you've been this like brand discovery guy for, close to decades. And you've had a lot of brands that you nurtured in 14 New York City Whole Foods, and now they're gangbusters. And I'm sure you've had some heartbreakers. I'm curious what, obviously no names, but like, what do you think got in the way of brands that had tremendous potential? They had a great story, they had a great product, they had community. What do you think got in the way of them really building something big?
Yeah, I mean, the most painful part for me is when I have to discontinue a product that is one that I really like, or by myself. I think when you think about what those brands could have done better, it comes down to a few areas. Communication is always one of the biggest. It's amazing to me that suppliers don't want to communicate. Everyone always says, "Oh, I know you're busy, I don't want to bother you." But sales is persistence, and you have to, and I say this at the risk of like clogging my inbox, but you also have to understand there's just one of me when you're emailing, but you have to be persistent and you have to communicate. When you get on the shelf and all of a sudden you're facing a packaging issue or a supply chain issue or whatever the issue is, hiding and not communicating out that issue and asking to work with someone is a really bad move, because you want to look at just as your retailer is an investor in your product, they're also a partner. They've agreed to partner with you to grow your brand. You have to do most of the work. I mean, the retailer is just putting on the shelf, but you have to look at them as a partner and treat them as a partner and say, "Hey, we've run into this problem. Here's the issue. Do you have any advice?" It doesn't. You might not get advice. You might just get like, "Okay, noted." But at least you're being transparent about the business. So communication is super important. You want to be focused. A lot of brands get excited and they get on the shelf and they're like, they've already thought through line extensions and category extensions before they've even gotten on the shelf. And if you don't have a core mix to your brand, then you don't really have a brand, because the core mix is key to the brand. And if the core mix is not solid, then the entire brand is not solid. So you really want to make sure you've got your core mix buttoned down and running in a smooth groove, right? So focus is super important. Listening and adapting. When you're in the store doing demos, and demos are a huge one, someone mentioned on the chat, you're listening to your customers. When you're doing a demo, when you're a founder doing a demo, you're a rock star. You're in the store, you're the one who created the brand, and the customers are going to come and talk to you and give you thoughts on the brand, have taken what you created, your idea, put it into their home and consumed it, which is about the most personal thing that could be done. So you're a rock star to them. Listen to what they're telling you. When they tell you, that it's too salty or too sweet or missing this or doesn't have that, or why doesn't it do this? Listen to them, make notes, and because that you're getting basically your one-on-one time with customers in the stores, and adapt. Be willing to adapt. So listen and adapt are the other areas to really focus on. You know, your brand needs to be able to change. It needs to be mutable. It can't be fixed as you saw it forever, because the market will shape and define your
Make it their
product as
own.
well once you put it out there. So that's
That's
my
awesome. Yeah, I mean, I got really good advice a long time ago too. Try when you do communicate with a retailer, hey, we have this problem, but here's our proposed solution, or here's the timeline that we're working on. Like, always try, if you can, to just say like, we recognize there's a problem. We're doing our best to solve it. Here's what we'd like to do to show you in the meantime, our goodwill. Wade, on that note, have you had any heartbreakers, and
Well,
what do you think happened?
I think again, transparency is just key, right? I mean, I always tend to use the analogy of the evil car salesman that's trying to sell you, you know what I mean? Just, and what I tell people is, we've all bought a car, right? At some point, I would think at this point, but not everyone has bought groceries from a brick and mortar store. So think about those pain points you have when you're buying a car and how that salesperson makes you feel. And, and some of those things just start ticking off in your head, like, man, I just wish they tell me the price. I wish they just do this. And,
Right.
All those pain points, right? The same analogies are there for this side of the desk. I think, my biggest fear is a brand, bringing a brand in that I really like, getting it on the shelf, and then they don't have enough quantity to supply refills, right? I mean, everybody, we're not saying dirty words when we talk about free fills and slotting and things like that, but you have all that taking place and you've done all those boxes and you get product on the shelf, and then you haven't thought it out far enough in advance on how you're going to get that next case on the shelf. And
Yep.
I think so there's a lot of things like that. So I always talk about being retail ready. And I also use the analogy of there's a big difference between like a local market, a farmer's market, or something like that somebody's just making salsa or something and slapping a label on and selling it on a Saturday from 10 to 3 versus trying to put it on a shelf with nutrition facts and all the things you need. There's a big difference there. And I think it all falls back to that crawl, walk, run, and just really understanding what you need to be to get from point A to point B, and not trying to get so fast that you're going to Z in the alphabet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just slowly, methodical, just really doing it that way. And I think at times brands can kind of be their own worst enemies without that. The other thing that I always say is, do what you say, but only say what you'll do. Right. And it works both ways. Right. So, whether you're talking about promotions or support or anything like that, just be upfront about where you're going to be. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, supply chain does come up in these conversations. It's interesting because it's the thing that kind of came up in Roundtable Part 1, which was a lot of brands lose steam because of nothing having to do with sales. They just lose steam because they have a supply chain problem, or their margins just like kill them. It's not always just that they don't do great on shelf. Some of them are doing well, but they can't fulfill. So retail ready is having your supply chain intact. Retail ready is also, I think, it's interesting when you had all of these digitally native brands, and it's a little different probably, Luan, because they are sort of on, a PDP, or like a product description page, is very different than an on-shelf package. But I think, yesterday's farmers market salsa is 2020's D2C packaged fill in the blank brand. Looked great on a screen, really worked in a certain environment in COVID, but being in a sea of 3,000 other things on a shelf, you can't be this wide. I mean, people want really, really, really skinny, and you can't be taller than the shelf because you won't fit. Loan, do you have any, I think going back to sort of the do what you say and say what you can do. Working with FreshDirect, there are these tools. There are these really fun digital marketing tools that you can use on e-com that don't exist, obviously, in brick and mortar. Are you continuing to build more of them? Are you seeing brands, lean into them? Obviously, there's like the homepage, and there's all these different things that brands can do. I guess, are you seeing evolution in that? Are you seeing success with that? Are you seeing brands really break through the noise by using those things? And how do you work with your brands to really set them up for the best, marketing tools for them?
Definitely. Yeah, I'd say with an online platform like FreshDirect, it's really visibility is paramount. So how do you make sure you get your product out in front of the customer while they're on their shopping journey on our site? The brands that I've really seen have the most success and really set themselves up for a strong launch are the brands that really lean into how e-commerce can support them. So we talked about, cross-listing on the site, having that secondary placement, really thinking about, if you live in the refrigerated section of a brick and mortar store, but you might also fit in, like, for example, just a pickles brand. You might be refrigerated, that would end up in the deli section, but we can also cross-list you like in the pantry.
Buns. Yeah.
and with buns too. And so the two tactics I really encourage brands to think about when they launch on our platform is the first one is how can you drive trial? And so it's getting into that customer basket for the first time is huge because we know that the majority of our customers start their weekly shop from that reorder page. So whether it's thinking about a sampling program or a strong promotion as you launch on the platform, those are definitely easy tactics to consider. The second one is search boosting, which is really big for online. And so I've seen a lot of brands really get creative with this too and do some of that cross merchandising. So as you said, making sure your sauce comes up when a customer is searching for meat or salmon on the site. Really leveraging some of those affinity products and brands that they know customers are shopping along with their own products. And something like for FreshDirect, your category manager contact is going to be your main point for planning promotions, sampling, shopper marketing, and we are really here to help you figure out how to effectively balance that budget across the different buckets.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So we have 1 minute left. I think you guys have all given your sort of like, that one little vote of, best advice. So I'm just going to take the last 30 seconds to say thank you to the three of you, not only for doing this panel, but for your support of emerging brands, all of you. I mean, the reason why we asked the three of you specifically was because you actually take the time, you invest yourselves, and you do really genuinely want us all to succeed. And we're really, really lucky to have you as our guides as we navigate this wacky little world that we've all kind of gotten ourselves into. So thank you so much. Everyone who came on, thank you so much for coming on. I hope this was helpful. Adrian, thanks for organizing. Naturally New York, always, it's a great organization that supports emerging brands, not just in food. Jake, thanks for being my partner in crime. And we'll see you at part 3 in a couple months.